Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are in the world. On the show today, I look back at all things COTA, where crashes and mistakes were the talk of the town as a Honda took its first Grand Prix win of the season. Remember, if you want to send us a question, you can voice note us, do it on your phone, or email us. It's podcast@crash.net, along with your name and where you're from. If you're voice noting it, keep it to 30 seconds, or you can just write us an email, and we'll try and get you on the show. Right, recording date is 18th of April. It's a Tuesday. It's in the morning. My name is Harry Benjamin. Joining me, as always, is Crash MotoGP editor Pete McLaren and former Grand Prix rider and British champion Keith Huewen, and this man, a superbike racer. This is back from 1983. Pete, so you were sent this photo with Keith and his luscious locks. Well, we need a bit of context for this, please.
Well, yeah, I'm sure Keith can explain it all. But yes, I was sent this by a mutual friend of ours, Mike. I think you could say it's the full video is on YouTube, so worth a look. But yes, a young Keith Huewen in his prime. I think he has a cracking race through the field and goes on to win. So yeah, Keith can explain the details. But yes, the man in the middle, at least for me and Harry on this screen, is yes, very familiar to us.
Funny, isn't it? It's such a long time ago. But yeah, I did have a life before you lot dragged me into the Crash studio, and they were really good days. I mean, two strokes to start with, no electronics particularly or any of that particular side of things. You had to take care of tyres. I mean, it's something that we'll be talking about as far as COTA is concerned in a minute. There's some relevance there still. You know, you had to manage your tyres, and in that particular instance, you know, I probably managed them quite well because as everyone else's was falling by. What is quite amusing, I've got to say, because I know the clip, someone sent me it as well, and it's one of those ones where you think, am I going to lean over in a minute? What you got to bear in mind is in those days as well, you had all the fuel was in a tank between your legs in your face. You know, fuel nowadays is a lot lower, stuck down in the seat unit. So you were always, I'm quite a tall, well, I'm not as tall as Harry by 5 inches, but anyway, the point being is your arms were wrapped around the tank. So you couldn't hang off the bike as far as you can now. Everything is now, you know, center of gravity's changed, you know, ride height adjustments and all the rest of it is all completely different. So, and you had, you know, 4-inch rims or something ridiculous. I mean, with slicks on, and the slicks were bowling ball. I mean, it's amusing talking about it now, but you got to remember that was then. That was as fast as you could go. That's as fast as anybody could go. I had the lap record at Donington and various other places as well during those days. But it's amazing how things have moved on. And when you get to COTA and you see the three classes, I mean, Moto3, MotoGP with Moto2 in the middle, I mean, honestly, I'm waiting to see what our predictions were because I forgot what we predicted, of course, for this weekend. But it's got to be so far wrong. But I seem to have in the back of my mind, I'm going to hate myself for this, is that Harry was almost right. And that kills me because he was so left of field with his prediction from memory from last week. So I'm going to hate you, Harry, and you're going to be buying all the drinks.
Yeah, I'm so glad you brought this up. Right, Keith's luscious locks to one side. So I am the only one that picked up any points from our predictions. So for the sprint race, I got I went Martin, Bagnaia, Miller. So I get a one full point for that, 2 half points being picked up for Bagnaia and Martin. And the Grand Prix, I had Marini on the podium. So I get the full point, and Bezzecchi and Martin. But you lot, absolutely nothing. Keith, Grand Prix, Bagnaia, Bezzecchi, Vinales, Pete, Marquez, Bagnaia, Bezzecchi, and then the sprint, Keith, Bezzecchi, Marc Marquez. Well, that one didn't work out at all, did it? That was a bit unfair, that one, really. Binder, and then Pete also went Marc Marquez, Bezzecchi, and Miller. But no.
I was close for the main race, though. Vinales, if he'd got a proper start, he was right there. And Bagnaia looked really good. Can we talk about MotoGP? Should we start off with MotoGP?
Yeah, absolutely, yes.
In the podcast. You know, I sat here at the start of that race and I thought, Bagnaia does not look comfortable. The bike was picking up in a couple of places that I hadn't noticed it picking up before, like he'd changed settings slightly and was delivering a bit more horsepower. He was out the front and he didn't look comfortable. And the only thing I can come to the conclusion of, despite the fact he was out the front and he got fresh air in front of him, was that the temperature, we know, popped up when it came to the start of the race. There was a lot of people. Maio Marigali from Yamaha was talking with Piero what's his name, the Michelin guy. They were having a big conversation. Lots of conversations going on about tyre pressures. And we know tyres around that place has been a major problem in the past. And I just wonder whether, afterwards, Bagnaia was complaining about, what did he say? It wasn't him. The Ducati was so good, it's no good. I love that. It was so good, he didn't have the feel that he thought he wanted. But I'm wondering whether maybe tyre pressure-wise, it just popped up just a little bit to the point where it just didn't quite have that front-end grip that he'd been used to during the week so far. Because it was up and down. It was COTA's a funny old track anyway. It's got bumps all over the bloody place. It's badly looked after. And every year it's different for some reason or another. So your data from the previous year is really pretty useless by the time you get to the next one. But I just wonder whether we got a situation. And he didn't look comfortable. I spent more time with my wife for some time, but I actually managed to get her to sit with me and watch the MotoGP, which is pretty unusual. And I said to her, I tell you what, Bagnaia, he don't look comfortable. And then 15 minutes in, whee, off he goes again. I'm screaming. The kids are running in here trying to find out what's up with Dad. Is he having a heart attack? Because at first, you had that contrast. At first, you thought Bagnaia's controlling this because we know how much pace he had during the week. He's controlling it. He's sitting there. He's just working it out. But then I said to her, he don't look comfortable on that bike. And of course, I might as well, she's got no clue what it's like to ride a Grand Prix bike. So it had no effect whatsoever when I was talking with her about it. And next minute, he's down. But next to that, what a ride from Rins. What a ride from Marini. I thought Marini was going to do Rins at one point. But Rins was perfectly controlling it. You guys talk about it. I'll fill in any gaps because it was fantastic. I mean, it was a fantastic podium.
All over the place with action at COTA, wasn't it, Pete? Well, let's go with Rins then, because I mean, who'd have thought it? Well, you might well have thought it after the sprint all of a sudden, because you're just thinking he has a bit of a penchant around COTA based on his previous categories as well in his junior career. But I mean, we had all but written off Honda at the start of the year, hadn't we? But then he goes and does something like that. Marc Marquez will be fuming. It wasn't him.
Oh, sorry, is that me?
Yeah, go on. Well, Keith wanted to come in there, didn't he?
I'm very conscious of butting in. You know how I do.
Go on, Keith, butt in, and then Pete pick up.
Well, I think, Mark, you mentioned the reason why I was sort of like this was that, Marc Marquez, obviously this bike has been built around Marc Marquez, pretty much. And, Rins, if they're no mugs, Lucio Cecchinello, he knows what he's doing. The LCR team really know what they're up to. And I get the feeling that Rins has settled into a really a kind team, a team that understands the rider. Lucio is a very fast man in his day as well, so he knows what's what. He's a very eloquent fellow as well. And with Rins and that team together, they've got that Honda perhaps a bit how Rins wants it rather than how Marquez wants it. And Rins, as you say, round there has got a fantastic record. But it's the way he controlled the entire race. He was doing everything bang on. Quartararo had a good ride behind because he got fresh air. He hadn't got to worry about, a Ducati ramming up the inside. The closest one to him was in front of him. So he got a situation where he could manage. It was a boring race. It was the worst race of the three. There's no doubt about that. And the racetrack, so much criticism over the racetrack as well. Sorry, go on, Pete.
Well, just on Rins, I suppose Nakagami, his teammate, was quite interesting because he spent most of the weekend trying to work out why is Rins going so much quicker than me. And his conclusion was that Rins was sort of riding it Moto2 style because of exactly what Keith was saying, the lack of grip on the track. Rins was carrying the speed through the corner. But, he wasn't suffering on the exit either. He wasn't having trouble from, let's say, not picking the bike up early, which is what we see a lot of MotoGP riders do, don't they? They pick it up, as Keith mentioned, and fire it out. Rins wasn't doing that, but he wasn't suffering that much from it either. Now, whether that was a low grip thing, who knows? It sounded a bit like what we hear with Quartararo and the other Yamaha riders, that he uses the corner speed to make up for the lack of exit somehow. But that was what Nakagami found. He wasn't able, obviously, to replicate it, but that was what he could see on the data. Nakagami was just suffering from crazy wheel spin on the exit of the corners, as he put it. As far as Mark, as you say, Harry, well, I'm not sure, what must he be thinking? I mean, okay, I'm trying to justify my double Marquez prediction for the victory here, but I mean, Rins is great at the track, as Keith mentioned, but I mean, Mark's won there 7 times, isn't he? You've got to believe he would have been up there this weekend. I mean, how did he feel seeing Rins win on that bike? The first non-Honda win, a non-Marquez win on a Honda since what, Cal, 2018? I mean, that's how long it's been since someone other than Marc Marquez has won on a Honda. Rins has gone and done it in his third race. Marc must have thought, you know what, I could have been up there on that. Rins isn't even on the latest spec parts either, is he?
Yeah, it's satellite.
Yeah, that's it. On the other hand, Marc might be thinking, you know what, I can't believe my luck here. Bagnaia's fallen twice, throwing 45 points away. Quartararo fell in the sprint race. Aleix fell on the opening lap of the main race with the ride height problem. Vinales, as Keith mentioned, was fast enough to win, but had two, sort of terrible starts with the clutch. So maybe, which way do you look at it? Is it the glass half full thing or not? I don't know. But I mean, Marc could have been up there leading this championship, couldn't he? Instead, Bezecchi's leading it, but I think he's got 60 points or something out of 111. So just over half the points, and you're leading the World Championship. So we all the riders and us, we were all talking about consistency, weren't we, at the start of this year? And no one's had it so far. So, it just stays unpredictable for now.
It's a modern-day phenomena in MotoGP that, the points are spread over a wider area than they've ever been. You've always had, a manufacturer or a rider who's pretty much dominated at some stage during the season in the years past. But it's not the case in the last couple of years, is it? It's the case everyone's got a bite of the cherry. And I think, once you become a believer at this level as well, there's 16 points between the top three at the moment. It's all to fight for. And Marquez could come back with all these rounds that we've got, sprint and main race type affair. Then he could come back and still win this championship. Now, whether he's going to or not is very much, it's going to be a wonderful season if he manages to do it from where he is at the moment. Let's put it that way. Marini was my man of the race for MotoGP. Vinales, you've mentioned that, Pete. That again. Useless start, whether that's down to the clutch, whether it's his operation of the clutch, I've got no idea. They know what's going on with that. Made a very poor start, ended up fourth. Reckons he could have been a race winner. I wouldn't argue why not either. I think I'd got him for the top three at one point in my little prediction thing, but it didn't work out. Yeah, no, I can hear the violin in the background.
It was quite funny because all the riders that fell off said they were on the line, on target to win. Jack Miller sort of joked about it. He said, yeah, I could have won, but I would say that, wouldn't I, when I fall like that.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Well, I mean, it's a nightmare racetrack. It is a nightmare racetrack. The changing conditions, the temperature can go from boiling hot to freezing cold in the morning. I mean, it's very cold in the morning for the warm-up. They had rain prior to the race meeting anyway, to the weekend. So the track was in poor order. I mean, one of the funniest comments, I watched it on BT Sport, and one of the funniest comments was how Hodgie was talking about Gavin Emmett's fairly young child, Edie, her name is, and it looked like some of the porridge that Edie got into the. Gavin turned around and said something along the lines of, "Well, she don't have any trouble. She gets porridge all over her face." Not like her dad, then, I think was the comment, because he's quite good at eating porridge. Is Gavin? But it was a very funny comment about the state of the track. Everywhere you looked, where there was it looked like porridge. It had absolutely been spread all over the track. It's a very strange thing that they do with that racetrack over there, how they manage it, how they maintain it. I think originally it was built on moving land that can move underneath. So we got the undulations and the ruts and the bumps and stuff from the fact that the very sub base of the track moves. So then they're forever trying to blade it flat on the top. Short of tearing it all up and doing it again, I think they've got a bit of a problem with that because it's always going to be on the move. But the way that they've maintained it and the areas of the track that people are having to try and avoid, and add to that a little bit of water as well, it was literally trying to dodge the patches of porridge everywhere. My joke with Gavin Emmett absolutely fell flat there because I couldn't remember exactly how he said it. So
we'll move on. We'll move on.
Yeah, we can move on with that. But it was a very funny comment.
It may have looked like
on the money.
It may have looked like porridge, but it could well have been Alex Marquez and sicking up all over the place on the track. He didn't have a great time and then came together with Jorge Martin. Why does Jorge Martin do this to me? I get behind a rider and he's so fast, yet he just never seems to have the luck to stay on. And it will, sometimes it's not his fault, sometimes it is. And, he's all the way down in the standings, 11th, with a 5th place Grand Prix. And you just think, well, that is MotoGP, isn't it? That's part and parcel of it.
I was going to say, it's one of those situations where you're managing quite a lot there, aren't you? And Jorge Martin, we know he's quick over one lap and can put a good race in, but he is still a little bit inconsistent with that. And will that come? I think it probably will. You can't make a slow rider fast, but you can make a fast rider a bit more consistent, and I think he will be come the rest of the year. I mean, the first 3 Grand Prix, they're all weird. You know, it's a situation. Portugal is not easy. Argentina is not easy. This one is not easy. We go to Jerez next. We're back to the normal situation, level playing field, Jerez. You know, barring weather conditions, and they can be tricky down there if we're unlucky. But you know, let's get to Jerez, where we've got all the data we want. Track stays exactly as is every single year. Nothing much changes there. We should be back to some kind of normality when we get to Jerez. But it was a great Grand Prix at COTA. Not particularly MotoGP, not particularly exciting, but but from a if you looked at the paperwork, you think, bloody hell, what happened there? Wasn't all that great a Grand Prix, but the Moto3 and the Moto2, absolutely outstanding Grand Prix, which kind of underlines again what we were saying in recent pods, in that unlike the Formula One series, if you like, where all the classes behind that are pushed back, they are support classes, they're just left to do their thing and fill the day out for the Formula One main event. In motorcycle racing, all 3 Grand Prix, despite the fact they obviously all have different status, you know, MotoGP is the highest status prototype category there is in motorbike racing anywhere in the world, so it is the top class. But as motorcycle racing fans, we really value Moto3 and Moto2, and this weekend, thank God, they performed. I mean, Ortola in the Moto3, unbelievable turn 2. You do not get that far out of a seat and stay on normally, let alone stay on and make your way through to win the race. Unbelievable. What a man. His first ever Grand Prix win as well, which is a little bit special. Yeah,
you could tell. I think he was a bit emotional in the post-race interviews as well. But well, let's come on to that then. Pete, let's go for Moto3. It was Ortola ahead of Mazir and Artigas. So Moto3 and then Acosta, of course, in Moto2, his second win of the season. So it really was all action across Moto3 in 2 classes.
It was, yeah. As Keith says, a lot closer than the big race, if you like, wasn't it? And Ortola, massive save, puts him way back in the field and then charges all the way through. And then on the last lap, he got past, I think it was Moira, wasn't it? Took the lead. And you thought, who's going to win this now? And then Moira ends up off the podium because Masia dives for second at the last corner and puts him slightly wide, which then allows Artigas, wasn't it, to sort of cut through. So we ended up from leading a few corners earlier to not even be on the podium. And then just, we can link it to MotoGP, I guess. There was a penalty after the race for David Munoz for taking out Nepa at that final corner. And because of the Marc Marquez thing, there's a few extra lines that have been added to it about clarifying that, this should be served at the next race. But it also says, the next race, let me quote this, unless the rider does not participate in this race for any reason related to this incident. Now, that sort of complicates things a bit further because it sounds like what they're saying is, if you're injured because of the accident for which you've been punished, you will still have to serve the penalty when you come back. But if you miss the race for another reason, let's say you have a training accident, you won't have the penalty will be gone when you come back. So it's a bit of a strange one. It refers to some protocol that apparently was issued at the end of March. Now that would have been privately between the FIM stewards and the teams. Presumably it wasn't published to anyone else. But so this is the first time we've seen this because it's included on the official penalty notice for David Munoz. So obviously this is fallout from the Marc Marquez thing, but it just seems on the face of it to sort of be complicating things a bit further, because what happens if you get injured, but then you say, I'm missing the race because I've got food poisoning?
It just, I don't understand why the simplest of lines can't be written. It just makes me smile. You've absolutely covered it. The fact is they're just complicating it a stage further. The penalty should be there when you next race.
Yeah, regardless of the reason.
Then,
yeah, and we should say we're still waiting for a final decision on the Marquez thing. It was announced that we were talking about, is it suspended or not, and then subsequently it was confirmed that it is suspended until they have an official verdict, which, as you said, Keith, should have been sort of the standard assumption anyway. But that's where we are. The penalty for Marquez is currently suspended, and we're still awaiting the final decision on whether he has to serve it or not.
Well, Honda will be running around with that. I mean, Honda will win that. There's no doubt in my mind.
I mean, the change of wording, doesn't it? Given that the wording has been changed, it indicates that, yeah.
In law, I mean, I don't know what the next stage is. This is the MotoGP Court of Arbitration, but then, of course, we've got the Court of Arbitration for Sport. Now, I wonder whether the MotoGP Court of Arbitration means that it can't be taken to the Court of Arbitration for Sport, which is the wider sports body that doesn't legislate, but looks through a rule book and rules overall. I wonder whether it can go still further if Honda have another avenue if this one isn't successful for them. I think it should be successful for them. I think it was written so badly that, I've spoken to a couple of race directors in recent weeks, and they're all just grinning at the how loose the whole thing has been written. All it needed was a couple of extra words in there, and it would have been absolutely a non-event situation, and Marquez will have his penalty when he races next.
Well, on penalties, Nigel has written in, hello Keith and team. Marc Marquez received a 2 long lap penalty for knocking off Jorge Martin in an almost identical crash with Martin knocked off Alex Marquez in Texas at the weekend. Where is his 2 long lap penalty? Can they at least be consistent? And why does everyone, including Martin, rail at Marc and then Martin get away with the same sin with no penalty? Where's the consistency?
Well, the trouble is, it's the way they see it. It's the way that the stewards, see the accident, and it is really, really tricky. And this is where it comes back again. I mean, we seem to have covered this in the podcast before, where I've said it's almost like you need today's riders. You were taking the mickey out of me a bit earlier on my concrete tyres riding around Donington Park on my 500cc Suzuki. Things have changed. I know how to ride a motorbike. I knew how to ride a motorbike really fast, but I don't feel I can make accurate comments about how you ride with aero, how you ride with ride height adjustments, how you ride with even seamless gearboxes. We never had seamless gearboxes back in the day either. The electronics you've got, there is so much more to racing a MotoGP bike now. I'm fairly opinionated and I think I know what I'm on about most of the time, but the problem is, of course, I actually don't. The point is, I haven't ridden a modern day motorcycle. And this is where I think even someone as brilliant as Freddie Spencer was, that guy is one of the first aliens, if not the first alien, I think I've put him down for it originally. Someone who does things with a motorbike that we have never seen previously. But he's fat, he's out of date, and he don't ride any of these motorbikes. Excuse me for all of those last slightly derogatory comments, because I respect Freddie hugely. I believe he knows what he's talking about when it comes to riding a motorcycle, but does he have those little nuances of riding a motorbike in today's high-tech way? Everything is slightly different now, and I think that one of the biggest problems we've got with these penalties as well I'm going to struggle to say this, but I'm going to have to. I get the feeling that the respect for Freddie is diminishing in the paddock, purely and simply because that consistency doesn't seem to be there. I think that the system that we have for making these penalties at the moment just isn't quite right. It doesn't actually sit well with riders. It doesn't sit well particularly with management either sometimes in these situations, and probably doesn't sit well with manufacturers. So somewhere there's got to be a better, a more accurate or more knowledgeable committee of people that make these penalties stick, but on today's facts, on today's way of riding, on today's technology. I just think that we're you've had it in Formula One. People make decisions sometimes and everybody at home goes, what? And you could almost have people at home making the decision, watching it on TV. Maybe we all have a button at home that you press, that's your penalty, 59.9% of people watching say you have got to hang upside down by your thumbs.
It's like Who Wants to Be a Millionaire? Ask the audience.
Yeah, it is literally. I mean, it's almost as daft as that, isn't it? But actually, it's probably not such a daft idea. It'd be quite good fun, wouldn't it? What penalty should he have? A, B, C, or D?
Yeah, vote now on the red button. Yeah, there you go, sorted.
But you know what I'm saying. I think that to have today's motorcycle races. Then, of course, I know what Pete's going to say. I can see busting his gut to get here. You've got the natural bias then of a rider who maybe rides for Ducati or rides for Honda or rides for Yamaha that has a slight bias towards his manufacturer or his teammate or whatever it is. There is no perfect system for this at all. It's a real nightmare. And whoever it was, I've forgotten his name because I've been blathering on for so long, but thank you very much for the question. The fact is there's no easy way of sorting this out. The consistency is missing, and it is the biggest bugbear in the paddock, the consistency that penalties are given. I don't know how they're going to sort it out, but I still think that more up-to-date men on the committee. Yeah,
I think.
But then you're into retrospective penalties, aren't you, Pete? Because you can't give that penalty when they're out there riding.
Yeah,
maybe they should have a button.
There you are. Yeah. Give each rider 3 penalty cards to hand out during the year to other riders, and yeah. You've got to pick your time and place, because if you use them all too early, then it'll go unpunished.
Instead of having a pit board, they, as they fly past the pits, they hold up their 200 mile an hour.
On the actual question, I think what happened, and again, this comes back to the fact that we don't get to see an explanation of why there's a penalty or not, especially in this case. But I think what happened here is it's a bit like Marini at Portimao, where Marini fell and then his bike took out Bastianini and there was no penalty. I think Martin fell and then he took out obviously Alex Marquez. So I'm guessing that's the comparison there, whereas Marc obviously collided with Oliveira and then they both fell. That's the only distinction. That this is just my opinion looking at them. I think that's the only distinction I can think of there.
But what you said in the first place, Pete, is bang on. And it's been a bugbear of mine forever, is the explanation of why the penalty is given. And this will be a legal situation because they don't want to see it leave themselves open. Because it's a bit like no comment, isn't it? When you sat there in the old police cell and they ask you a question, no comment, because you don't want to hang yourself somewhere later down the road. So they don't put the details in it when they should. Or they should, at least a précis of their reasoning behind why that was given. And I think that it does the fans no good. It does the paddock no good. It's like this: we have made this decision, and that's what it is. But we ain't telling you why. It's annoying.
Well, thank you, Nigel, for that question. I fear that, it's always penalties. It's a question that is always asked continually throughout the season, so I'm sure that will come back. We got away a little bit there. I want to bring it back to Moto2 now, if I may be so bold, and mention Pedro Costa's second win of the season, ahead of Tony Arbolino and Bo Bensnader on the podium as well, which everyone was very happy about. Big thumbs up there. So Moto2 action was good. For our home man, Jake Dixon, no disservice to Sam Lowe's as well, but Dixon is the one up there at the moment. Sadly, couldn't even start the race.
Well, it's interesting, isn't it? We had Bagnaia saying it wasn't his fault, or words to that effect, because the Ducati didn't have the feel that he needs to have. It's the best bike on the grid. It's so good that I don't have any feel. And then we've got Dixon, who was clearly miffed afterwards. I mean, I've not spoken to Jake. Clearly after that incident, he felt there was some reason for it that they hadn't yet got to the bottom of, and I haven't heard anything since. But falling off on the warm up lap, on the warm up lap is like a nightmare. It's like your worst case scenario. He was a potential race winner there. And to be down on the deck, we didn't really get a full-on clear picture of what had gone on to take him down the road. That was unless that showed later. But I didn't see anything that he was really, really, like Bagnaia, unable to accept responsibility for what happened. I'm of the opinion that probably both of them were responsible for what happened. It's a situation where you are managing. If your sighting lap has gone, and mind you, having said that, I said already that the temperature had got back up again. So, I mean, it's a long lap round there. And if your sighting lap wasn't quite quick enough, you haven't been pushing, to keep heating tyres and so on, by the time you've come round to start your warm-up lap, to come round to the grid, da-di-da-di-da-di-da, you can let your tyres drop in temperature a little bit, but it was an unusual accident. It might turn out that Jake...
The wind direction as well, Keith, maybe? There's some riders spoke about the wind direction changing.
It did pick up a lot. You're right. I mean, there are all sorts of things that can catch you out on a racetrack like that. Yeah. I don't know, but it's a crying shame. Jake is crying out for that first Grand Prix win, and I still believe it's coming. I mean, but of course, he's not doing his championship looking a lot of good. And also, it's not a nice fit, as both Bagnaia and Jake probably have found out on social media afterwards. Blaming the bike or blaming anything other than themselves doesn't go well. Sometimes you're better off just being quiet, no comment, Your Honour.
Can't imagine you ever did that.
Yeah.
No
Easier
comment.
said than done. Yeah, no comment. No comment from Huewen. Unbelievable.
It's funny. We were talking about some of the shows we're going to do in the summer break, and one of them was with perhaps a Barry Sheen feature later on in the year as well. Seeing as you were looking at my rather aged race-winning ways back in the day, and
Pre-M25. Can you believe?
Yes, folks, we were talking about travelling to Suzuki, which was based in Crawley, went from Beddington Lane to near Gatwick, and they had no M25 in those days. Had to go through the middle of London to get to work. Imagine that, folks. Anyway, we won't go there right now, but we may have quite an interesting feature coming up in the summer break that will. These two won't be able to stop laughing, and I would imagine I could keep you all amused at home as well when we get to that stage.
Well, we look forward to that. But let's pick up on Pete, third place man, Bo Bensnader. I mean, great to see him on the podium as well.
Yeah, for several reasons, wasn't it? Not just that he'd been a long time, well, his first podium in Moto2, he'd been on the Moto3 podium a long time ago, but yeah, I think his grandfather passed away over the weekend, so, he'd obviously sort of channeled all the emotion from that and really delivered, so yeah, fantastic for him to sort of pay tribute to his grandfather in that way, so yeah, and to be honest, this isn't a flash in the pan for Bo, is it? He's been building up, he's been getting stronger and getting quicker, so I think we'll see more of it.
Yeah, I mean, and it's been a while, hasn't it? I mean, that's the first Dutchman on a Moto2 podium. Okay, we've had him in 250cc when it was the middleweights before, when it was two strokes going back in the day, but that's the first actual Dutchman that we've had on the podium. And Bo Bensnader, Barry Baltus deserves a bit of a mention in dispatches as well. He was having a great ride. Barry Baltus, talking to Barry Sheen, it was named after Barry, got the number 7 that he carries on his bike. I love all them connections. and Barry Baltus was having a really good Grand Prix as well until he dumped it. But it was a weekend of outstanding rides from people that we never expected to see where we ended up seeing them.
Absolutely. Well, what's that done for the championship? In Moto2, at least, Tony Arbolino tops it, 61 points to Pedro Acosta in second, but closing 54 points. Aaron Canet in third, Salach Lopez the top 5, Dixon, Gonzalez, Somkiat Chantra down in 8th, ahead of Alcoba and Albert Arenas in 10th, and then Lowe's and Bensnader at the top 12. So it's certainly tightening up at the top at least. In Moto3, Daniel Holgado, 49 points. It's actually as tight as you can get it. They're tied on points with Morero as well, 49 points apiece. Artigas Masia and Tatsuki Suzuki, retired out on COTA, but he still holds on to a top 5 position for now in the standings. Let's come back to a MotoGP because there's something we didn't cover that I'm intrigued about. And it's to do with Aprilia. We saw Maverick Vinales poor starts, but managed to recover. Could have even taken it to the podium, maybe for the win. But Aleix Espargaro and Ralph Fernandez as well, having tough days. Aleix crashing out. But they picked up on the fact that they both suffered ride height glitches. And that might well have been the response for their bad days at the office. Pete, you're nodding like you know what that means and what's going on. What can you tell us?
Well, it was interesting because there's no mention of it in any of the official press releases from Aprilia or RNF. But good old Aleix, I mean, he just comes straight out with it and says it was the ride height failure, and it's what Raul had as well. And Raul wouldn't confirm or deny it either way. He just mechanical issue. That's all I can say. But yeah, I mean, yeah. So what Aleix said, he didn't pop up at turn 1, which obviously it should, and so he rode the rest of obviously not all the lap, but as far as he got, which was turn 12, with it low. And then as he accelerated out of turn 12, because the bike the weight balance was wrong, he just lost the front. So, yeah, he said it's not the first time it's happened. Not really sure why, maybe related to hot conditions. But then he said it seems like they're not quite sure why it occurs and why it doesn't. But yeah, I think the team were not too keen on Aleix to give too many details about it. But yeah, he definitely confirmed that that's what it was. So yeah, bit of a concern. We did see it last year, didn't we? Was it Germany with Vinales? So Raul obviously on the 22 bike, Aleix on the 23 bike. So it's especially concerning when you've got 2 different years of bike, but maybe they're common parts.
This was a big worry, wasn't it, when ride height adjustments started to come? The fact with it releasing or it sticking down or whatever it might be, the way the systems work, the big concern was that it wasn't going to work. I suppose the equivalent is the good old DRS device in Formula One. You know, if the thing jammed open, you've got no wing when you tip it into the next corner, and you need a bit of that on those things. And a similar situation with the motorbikes. If you've got, you know, the ride has still sat down, you know, washing the front out, you've not got any weight over the front wheel, so therefore you lose all your traction at the front. So it was a concern back in the day, but Aprilia definitely have a problem with that. And, you know, what it does do, of course, is confidence. It just saps a tiny bit of confidence. You know, is it where I need it to be? Is it going to react how I want it to react? That is a problem. But Vinales, he looked good, but not good enough. That podium was begging him, but not getting the start. Again, somewhere here. I mean, if you finish the race here, you got points. You know, 14 finishes at the end of the day. Everyone got points. Even Jonas Folger, I think, got points as well. Jonas Folger was so far off.
Shout out to them. Pirro and Folger both getting points.
He was so far off the pace, Jonas Folger. I mean, I don't know what anyone was expecting of him, but, you know, he can ride a motorbike, that we can see. But at that level, having had that amount of time out, I mean, crikey, talk about in the deep end at a place like COTA of all places as well. Nightmare, I'd have said, for Jonas, but scored points. Good on him. Yep. That'll go down on his CV.
Kept it on the bike.
That's it, yeah. I mean, was it 10? I think it was 10 fallers in the Sunday race, wasn't it? Brad Binder got back on, obviously, as you mentioned, because there was, you know, he still scored points because so few people finished. So, and Folger, yeah, coming back, I think he said to the team when they kind of approached him, he's like, look, my racing days are done here. I'm fully test rider mode now. But they said, well, look, you know, this treated as test riding. You know, get time on the bike and everything else. You know, this is a golden opportunity here to really, you know, get up to speed. He's only sort of officially signed on as a KTM test rider at the start of this year. So, you know, they've obviously got Danny Pedrosa, and Mika Kallio seems to be moving more from test riding to sort of the rider coach thing. So Folger's there. He's sort of being groomed to be the sort of the next sort of test rider alongside Danny Pedrosa. And it's a great chance for him to learn the bike back with the team that he spent that, well, nearly one season in MotoGP with, wasn't it? Tech 12 back when they were with Yamaha.
How long do we think he'll be on the bike for? In terms of when do we think Pol?
I think Pol is. You're looking at probably a Mugello, so I think at least 2 more races, at least. Right, okay. I think it's the jaw injury. I think for Pol is one of the biggest things for him. I think Hervé Ponchar was saying over the weekend that, I mean, it's as with any jaw injury, it's fractured. He had to drink soup for, you know, a week or something, you know, and all that kind of stuff. So painful as well, but. Yeah, let's hope he's over the worst of the injuries, and you know, he's back on the way up and back soon. But yeah, I think definitely not at Jerez the next race, so Folger will be there then. But maybe, I think Le Mans is the one after that. That still seems a bit early, but maybe Mugello following that.
Comes back to what I said in podcast past, or we've discussed in podcast past, with this new 42 race format. 21 plus 21. Not a race, it's a sprint.
No. Yep. Careful.
The point being is that pretty soon, I think, teams are going to need to have big backup names for when we've got injuries mid-season. You know, they're contracted to, I think it's 10 days, isn't it? They're allowed to have, you know, no rider on the bike for 10 days, something along those lines, and then they've got to have someone that rides them. Well, it's all very well bringing someone like Folger, who's hardly used to the KTM, and chucking him in the deep end, but that, you know, there's a safety issue there. There's all sorts of issues there with that. He's not going to be fast enough, clearly. You know, Stefan Bradl is a commentator now. Yet there he is, out every weekend at the moment on a Grand Prix.
They'll be calling you soon.
Once they see that YouTube video.
Yeah. Just keep it on the tarmac, Keith, until the end, and you might pick up some points.
A minute.
Oh dear. But you know what? That's a really good point, though. Like having these, official, backup riders. You're gonna have to have a couple, but this could give those golden opportunities to, we discussed the likes of Toprak or those who have had previous recent experience. Look at Remy Gardner or even Ika Lecuona, who are actively racing at the sharp end already.
If you're signed on to a manufacturer's contract, then pretty much they can do what they like with you. So if you, I don't know quite how the interaction between World Superbike contracts and MotoGP contracts and the manufacturers, whether in World Superbike you're signed to a team rather than a manufacturer. Certainly in MotoGP, you're signed to a manufacturer quite often, in the majority of cases. Even if you're in an independent team, you're assigned to the manufacturer. So effectively, they could move you around, Ducati in particular, because they've got 8 bikes out on the grid. So if they wanted to move you about, potentially they probably could make those moves. Now, whether they can, as an integral situation regarding contracts. Maybe Toprak, if he's signed to Yamaha, and Yamaha want him to deputise in MotoGP, I wonder what's to stop him from doing that if his management have signed that contract to say that he is it is possible. Keenan and everyone else, Keenan Sofawoglu, who is Toprak's manager, I'm fairly sure will not have allowed that at this point. But you can see it coming in future years with these 42 races, 21 sprints, 21 races type situations. When are they going to change that and make it just 42 races?
But good point about the Toprak test. Of course, he was halfway through his test on last week's podcast when we were speaking, wasn't he? So that those 2 days have now finished. Initially it was like, he's within a second of the test riders, but then sort of more and more information slipped out because there were other teams there. It was a private test, but of course there was the test teams from Ducati, KTM as well, Honda. So, there's other people watching the timing screens and seeing, Toprak's gone out in a new tyre, nice shiny black tyre there. More information came out. It seems like the pace, the average pace was still quite some way off the test riders there. Now, obviously those test riders, people like Danny Pedrosa and Cal, they're fast guys, but still, if you're looking at a factory MotoGP seat, which Toprak is, you need to be really as quick as those guys. I mean, then we saw after that, sort of those leaks were coming out, then Lynn Jarvis spoke, he was to MotoGP.com, some other TV companies, sort of making clear that, Toprak didn't feel comfortable on the bike in the way that he does on the superbike, which is quite natural. But, he said he'll need more time. He'll need to adjust his style quite a lot to get the speed, also indicating that the speed is still an issue there. So we don't know, will there be another test or not? But to be honest, it's looking, Toprak and MotoGP, I think for next year is looking pretty unlikely now. Not least because, there's no satellite team. Even though I know Keenan's made clear he's not interested in the satellite team, but it looks like there'll only be 2 Yamahas, and Lynn Jarvis said that Morbidelli is their number one choice in terms of if Morbidelli can keep the pace he showed in Argentina, he'll get sort of an automatic renewal. So, yeah, I think it's moved a bit away from Toprak and after this test.
From a management point of view, Keenan might have dropped the ball a bit there. I mean, it's all very well knocking back the independent thing, but independence is those are factory bikes in MotoGP nowadays. Across the board, they're all fast bikes and pretty much capable of winning on occasions wherever they are. And I think that you're bang on it, Pete. I think that Toprak is dipped a bit in form this year, both in World Superbike, and definitely the test wasn't anything quite as shiny as he might have liked it to be. I mean, we speculated whether Lynn Jarvis was down on the plot, basically to make sure management was up to speed on what was going on from Keenan's perspective as the manager of Toprak. From Yamaha's perspective, Lynn Jarvis, managing director of Yamaha Racing, on site as well. I mean, it was a fairly high-powered test when you've got those kind of people all on, observing what's going on. Now, if I go back to the good old days, I remember those kind of tests in the past that I've been involved in. And it's a nightmare from a rider perspective, particularly if it's not going how you want it to go. Factory Honda tested us at a place where you've just been for Goodwood, and I smashed this factory bike to absolute smithereens. There was nothing left of it, and it was destroyed because I knew I'd got to put a time in to make it look good. We didn't quite get to that. There wasn't one left by the time we finished with the bike, but it was and I think it was Takazumi Katayama's Suzuka 8-hour bike as well that I destroyed. So there was no way they were going to glue that thing back together by the time I finished with it. But getting back to reality, the pressure that Toprak would have been under would have been quite immense at that point. He knew this is a pivotal moment in his career with MotoGP. So the fact he wasn't able to get closer to the times he needed to get to and respond to that pressure positively is a surprise to me. I was expecting much more from it, and I would expect that he was as well. So it's a bit of a ricket in the old career at the moment. That was a golden opportunity to show him, hang on, this is what I can do. Adjusting to the bike is all part of MotoGP. We've talked about this before, back in the day when they changed from Bridgestone to Michelin's, how everybody had to change their style. You have to adapt like lightning to what you've got to make those, first of all, rider adjustments before you even start to make machine adjustments. You've got to get the best from what you've got straight away. And clearly he wasn't able to. will we see him in MotoGP ever? Because the trouble is, with the way that the market moves, from Moto 3 to Moto 2 to MotoGP, the next best thing isn't far behind us. And who will it be? I've got a few candidates that are showing up at the moment. We'll see how we get to halfway through the season, but Top Rack might be yesterday's man a bit quick.
Well, just from what we've witnessed as well over the last couple of years, it seems like, if you move from MotoGP to World Superbikes, then that kind of seems like you can't really come back from that, and that's the way it really sort of goes. You don't see many, especially in the last couple of years, going the opposite way. Look at Remy Gardner. He had to sort of take a lifeboat out to World Superbikes, Lequona and the like. So, interesting to see if that continues in that kind of form. Now, before the weekend of racing got going, there was a little bit of a rumour, a rumbling between Dorna Chiefs and Formula One management that we might well be looking forward to some joint race weekends. Formula One and MotoGP racing on the same weekend at the same track. I think that would be bloody brilliant, especially for MotoGP.
Yeah. I mean, it will. From a PR perspective, of course it will. You're opening up a fan base that's absolutely massive. Formula One have got that right. I think MotoGP have got more to gain PR-wise from it than F1 ever have. I mean, F1 is flying again now. MotoGP has dipped in a couple of markets. It definitely needs a bit of a boost. It needs to see something different. Is it a bit of a gimmick? I think it really is. And the problem you're going to have is, several-fold, isn't it? Just from a paddock point of view, the Formula One guys, it's like a sterile area with gate men all over the bloody place. I mean, you know what it's like when you joined me for BSB the other week, Harry. Every time we walked through a fence or a gate, you froze because you thought someone was going to shout at you or grab you by the shoulder.
The first thing I said to James Hayden as well at the weekend when I saw him, I was like, oh, the BSB, you can just walk around anywhere.
Well, MotoGP's not quite like that. I mean, we are quite strict on passes and stuff like that, but you can get them, for the right people, and they are there, and charities can get passes for their punters that have won various things. I mean, it's loose compared with Formula One. That's just the paddock side of things. Is there going to be enough room for all those egos? I wonder. I don't know why that just went through my mind was Fernando Alonso, who ended up going out with Valentino Rossi's girlfriend, Linda Morselli, going back a while. So there may even be some interest from a paddock social point of view as well, if I may say so.
Netflix would love it.
But getting back, although Fernando is no longer with Linda, and he's only, I think he's just party company with the latest model as well. He does get around, Fernando. He could be in a bike paddock. He'd be right at home.
Well, he's got a bit of a relationship with the Aprilia guys, hasn't he? He's been spotted in the garage a couple of times, so he obviously gets on with them. Well,
I mean, Lewis Hamilton is actually fast on a superbike. They did that the switch program that they did between Valentino. It was. I mean, there's a wonderful synergy, but that's where it stops for me. Let's be sensible here. We're talking about tire grooves completely in the wrong place. We're talking about debris in completely the wrong place for motorcycles. The closest thing I can think of, well, it's not close even, is it? Is Macau, where you've got bikes and cars sharing a track at the same weekend. That really is a holiday. I think of Macau as a holiday race, certainly from a motorcycle point of view. Although having said that, it's got a bit serious over the last few years, that's for certain. It's a street circuit, it's dangerous. We wouldn't be doing that with the cars. We won't be seeing them going around Monaco together, for instance. That won't happen.
Oh, God.
It will be on a safe track. Although I can imagine some of the bike boys quite happy to have a little look at that. It'll be quite good fun. But it will be on a safe track, in inverted commas. But the problem is the cars use completely different lines. Tyre degradation is a major thing, from a bike point of view as well. The bikes will be at a disadvantage hugely from a grip and setup point of view, running on a car track at the same time as cars do. That would be my concern as it is at the moment. Plus the fact you're immediately into a situation where infrastructure-wise, we've got to have safety barriers that are, friendly. Cars don't like those kind of things because they disappear under things, and maybe there's a fire, implication or something along those lines. So cars want separate. They don't want gravel traps. Cars hate gravel traps to start with. They want tarmac so they can spin round and round and round and scrub off the speed, whereas bikes need gravel traps. So there's quite a lot of implications from a safety perspective. I'm wondering how they can put that together, and moreover, what track they could put that together at.
Well, I'm just thinking in my head, especially tracks on the F1 tracks on the F1 calendar that have different layouts. So obviously, I know the infrastructure thing would make this, but I'm just thinking Bahrain, for instance. You've got this outer loop that they used once in the F1. If you just used that outer loop for the MotoGP riders, and then use the full circuit for the Grand Prix.
We share tracks already, don't we? Mugello, Portimao. Well, I mean,
yeah, but I'm just saying, if you've already got the set, you're talking about the tyre grooves and the rubber being in different places. Well, that could be a way of minimizing the effect there if you actually ran them on two different layouts. Just trying to think of ways this could happen, but actually, I mean, Pete, we're looking at, they'd probably, Formula One, as we know, it has Formula 2, it has Formula 3, it has Porsche Super Cup, which Jorge Lorenzo is doing, by the way, this year, full-time season. But having the time for that, car. Yeah, having the time for that and the time for Moto 2, Moto 3, maybe even Moto E, chuck that in there as well as another factor. You'd have to scrap the support category, surely.
I think so, Harry. Yeah, it's the practicalities, isn't it, as you guys have been explaining, that would make this, like, would you need two sets of race direction? And how would they, so you need the MotoGP team, you need the F1 team, and how would they communicate with the marshals? Air fences. If a car hit one of those, we see in MotoGP sometimes, if an air fence is damaged, you've got to stop the session to replace it. So, what would you do then? Would you take them away between the sessions? I mean, it's a great idea, isn't it, in theory, and you could make it happen in some way, but when you actually sort of dig into it deeper, the contractual side, as you say, you need to look, I think, as Keith said, look at the races, the tracks that already have contracts for both MotoGP and F1. That would at least get you part of the way around contractual issues. But then again, you've still got all the things you mentioned, Harry, about would you need two circuit layouts or something like that? Yeah, it's a tricky one to make happen. Would the price
of the ticket go up?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, that's it. I mean, really tricky to make it happen. And as you say, who would have most to gain? I mean, if they did it in somewhere where MotoGP has a sellout crowd, well, there wouldn't be much point, would there, for MotoGP? I mean, thinking selfishly from if you did it at Buriram or Sepang or Assen, where the Sunday sold out, what's the point? On the other hand, if you do it at a track where the attendance isn't that great, then it could be a really good boost for MotoGP. So loads of things.
I can't imagine Formula One wanting to be part of Bog Off. Buy one, get one free.
It's a dream kind of scenario, but I think that's where it will remain, isn't it? But if there's a way, you could kind of do a couple of almost like showcase events where you could have the MotoGP racing and just give it that platform that it well and truly deserves.
I think you're absolutely bang on there. I mean, we did have, was it Hopper that rode a factory Suzuki round Brands Hatch for a BSB event? And it was, people were on the fence, wanting to see it, but they're bike people. I think sometimes, car people don't perhaps, if you're a Mugello, for instance, and a motorbike came past you at 225 mile an hour, you'd step back because it is pretty phenomenal to see. So you'd have to be fairly careful if you were going to do a demo that you could get the best out of a bike. Would it show the fan at trackside and on TV the full potential of a motorbike? You've got to be fairly careful because, we're not as quick through corners, obviously. And some of the change of direction in Formula One, you just go, whoa. So you'd want the same effect from a bike, really. If you were showing it to another audience, you'd want them to go, wow, look at that. That's impressive. Otherwise, you could just drop the ball a bit with that and you wouldn't be showing it in the right light. I can't see top class Formula One, MotoGP racing on the same track. Not racing. I just can't. I can't see where and I can't see how. And I can't see the point in it other than PR. And I think, do we want to dilute either sport by having demo type races? I don't think so. I think it needs to be the best of the best. Formula One is the best of the best. MotoGP is the best of the best. Diluting that slightly goes against my particular grain.
Well, we'd love to know what your thoughts are on that. Let us know in the comments and on social media. Would you want MotoGP and F1 to race across the same weekend at the same racetrack? Would you attend?
Mallory Park. They need to go to Mallory Park. Formula One and MotoGP at Mallory Park.
Jesus Christ. Oh,
they only need 2 gears.
Yeah. Some of having just been at Goodwood over the weekend and seeing how how narrow the pit lane is there and actually how scary that track is as well. To see some of these cars, you know, half of Goodwood is sort of almost a bit demonstration racing, but actually it is not. What are you showing us there, Keith? Is that Scar?
The Goodwood holes in my body.
Oh God! If you haven't seen Goodwood racing, I'd thoroughly encourage you to look it up on Google. It can be quite exciting, but you'll know what I mean. There's not much runoff area.
It's a great racetrack. It's a fun racetrack. Bit of undulation and some fast corners, which bike racers like. But you're right, the runoff is very 1960s.
Well, you've got a lot on the inner loop, but not so much heading towards the walls, being an airfield. But let us know what you think. F1 and MotoGP, same race weekend. Yes, or no. Pipe dream, never going to happen. And if it did, it would just be a PR stunt. Let us know. But no racing this weekend. We have a bit of a weekend off, and then, as you say, we go to Jerez, however else you want to say it, in Spain for that. So we'll have a weekend off. So no predictions this weekend. We'll come back and try better. But I am leading.
From our last ones.
I am leading 6.5 points in the lead. 5 points. Keith is in second. And Pete, you're dwindling 2.5 points. Terrible. Buck up your ideas. Right. Anyway, in the meantime, we shall love you and leave you and see you next week. You can tune in across crash.net in the meantime for all the latest news, features, analysis as well. And we shall be back, as I say, next week to preview all things Spain. Get your questions in, leave them in the comments section, or you can tweet us, just search Crash MotoGP, or you can even send us an email and a voice note. podcast@crash.net is the email address. And make sure you leave us a review wherever you get your podcast, particularly on Apple and Spotify. It just really helps us with the algorithms and such. Thank you, Pete McLaren, Keith Huewen. I've been Harry Benjamin. We'll see you next week. Bye-bye.